Hi everyone, thank you so much for joining us today for the Untangle Tech Talk series. Today we'll be just demonstrating the WAN Balancer and WAN Failover applications and showcasing how these applications work within our NG Firewall solution as well as with other applications. My name is Shannon Miles and I'm part of the product marketing team here. I'll be your host today. John Coffin is here as well. He's our Director of QA and he'll be going through the demonstration and answering any questions. For those of you who are dialing in, you will need to make sure that you use the access code provided. So be sure to select the right audio preference on your right-hand side. Just a reminder, this webinar is being recorded, so you'll have the option to rewatch or revisit or share this webcast with any of your colleagues. We'll be answering questions throughout the presentation, so please be sure to submit the questions in the Q&A box on the right-hand side. And as always, if we don't get to your questions or you have a follow-up question later on, please send us an email at sales@untangle.com or support@untangle.com. Now before I move on, I want to reiterate that this is a highly technical webinar, so if you're not familiar with networking concepts or the Untangle solution, then this probably isn't the right webinar for you. We do have a 101 webinar series that is more high level. And we actually have one coming up next week on schools. So if that's of interest to you, I would check that out. All right, so with that, I'll pass it over to John, and he'll get started.
Thanks, Shannon, and thanks everyone for joining us. Hopefully we can answer any questions you have and provide information on this WAN Failover and Balancer. So probably the first question is, do I need WAN Balancer and Failover? Mainly if you have multiple ISVs going to your network connections, you probably need it. If you want to do special routing of your LAN traffic to specific IPs, you can do that with a routing table. WAN Balancer just makes it far more easier. Also, you can equally distribute the outgoing traffic across multiple WANs, and by multiple WANs, it's 2 or more. So really, it just depends on how many network NICs you have on your Untangle, is how many ISPs and WANs that you can create with that. So here's a basic connection. So I can pick any of the NICs on my Untangle box and convert those into WANs, and then connect my individual ISPs to those. One key issue with WAN Failover, you do not want multiple WANs going to the same ISP modem box or Ethernet box. The reason is that that's actually not a separate connection. Most ISPs, they have a bonded connection. So if they don't provide separate modems for those different connections, then you should not use them as separate WANs. So that's kind of a critical issue. A lot of people, they end up getting, 4 or 5 IP addresses from their ISP, and then what they do is create a WAN for each one of those, and they wonder why things don't work. It's because the routing tables do not work in that way. And so if you get multiple IPs from one ISP, those should be IP aliases, and I can kind of demonstrate that. So if you're only using one ISP, what you should do is list those IP addresses directly onto one. So I have my main IP address, and then I would list my separate IPs under IP aliases, so forth. But in this case, I actually have multiple ISPs, and in this case, they don't have to be in order of your NICs. So in this case, I have my number 1 NIC is one ISP, and my number 3 NIC is ISP, and the key is, it's just, is this an interface a WAN? So now I have 2 NICs set up for my dual WAN system, and the next thing I have to do, I need to go over to Advanced and my QoS, and I need to assign the speed of those particular WANs. So you don't have to have equal speed WANs connected to your WAN Balancer for it to still handle. You just need to tell it what the speeds, and they don't have to be asymmetric. they actually can be, where you have more upload and download, and WAN Balancer will handle that for you. But you need to do is actually put in the WAN download bandwidth speeds and upload bandwidth speeds under the QoS area. So now we'll take a look at my WAN Balancer, and we'll take a look at traffic allocation. So I've kind of made the traffic where most of it goes through my main WAN, only because it has a far bigger bandwidth than my other one, and it automatically weights that for you based on the ISP. But you can go ahead and change this. For example, some people only want to use their main ISP, and they want the other one to be a backup. So you would do something like this: 100% going through the main. So only if the traffic, if the main WAN went down, would traffic be redirected to the secondary WAN in this case. And you can do this with, multiple ISPs. If you have 3, 4, 5, maybe there's a particular one you only use in the case of backup. So you would literally give that a weight of 0, and then give the other ones equal distribution. In this case, we only have 2, so we'll give the main one 100%. And then that will allow the traffic to go through. And you can actually see that in your session viewer. This is probably the most useful tool, is the session tool, is you can actually see what WAN they're going out. So what I'll do is just say, okay, I want to take a look at my interfaces right here. So we're looking at client and server interfaces. So in this case, I can see which interface they're going out. In this particular case, see, this one is actually using my secondary WAN, which is my interface gamma. And you can rename these as you wish on them. So they can actually mean something, like you can have one set up if you're using AT&T for one, and another one you're using Comcast. You can actually label those correctly, so they make a little more sense for you. So in this case, you can see, very little traffic is redirected to the gamma, because that's only has a weight of 10, while the other one has a weight of 90. And you can see the bulk of my outgoing connections are through the main one, which is weighted at 90. So that's kind of the weighting that you can do. But sometimes you have cases where you want a particular device on your LAN to go through a specific WAN or ISP. One example I have is if you have any kind of IP phones, a lot of times they're locked into a particular IP address, and so you don't want them staggeredly connecting multiple sessions across different WANs or ISPs. So in that case, what you're going to do is go into your WAN Balancer, and you want to do route rules. And route rules is just a very simple way to do any kind of routing. So you don't have to know IP addresses. You don't have to do the translation into your outside IP. It's simple. For example, my phones, I want to make sure they go out the highest capacity connection that I have, so they have good voice connections. So in this case, all I have to do is tell it what's the source address of my IPs, of my phones, and give the IP address, or a range in this case. You also can do a wide variety of, you can base it on port, like if you want to do all FTP out of a specific ISP. Also on incoming, if you want only specific countries to come in through particular ISPs. That's another thing you can do. That's actually new for 12.1. But in this case, so I want my phones to go through, and I want to go through my external, which is my highest capacity WAN in this case. And it does give you a choice of everything you have. And there's also a choice of balance, which is really the default. Generally, it will try to balance your loads across that by default. And you don't have to actually use that, but if you have a particular set of rules that have IPs as a certain thing, but you want a specific port, to be balanced, you can make 2 rules on that case. So in this case, I'm going to have all my phones go through my biggest bandwidth, and I just say that. And from now on, if we look at my session viewer, you'll notice all the phones, which are the higher IPs. Let's get down here at the bottom. So all the 200s in this case are my phones. As you can see, they're all going out through the external. None of them are going through the secondary one, which is gamma, interface gamma. Another case where I had to balance it, this particular location has an alarm system that goes through the internet, and we had to lock it to a specific IP address because they only allow connections to the centralized alarm system through a particular IP address. So in this case, I used one of my secondary WAN IPs, so I had to make sure the alarm system always goes out the secondary WAN, so it gets the right IP, so it matches the IP on the other end, so they're allowed to talk to each other to go past their firewall rules. So those are the kind of typical case routing rules. You don't have to use source address, although I did use it in this case. I mean, you could definitely do something like if you want to do destination ports, like you want all FTP traffic to go through like your third WAN or something like that. In that case, you would just use destination IP, and you would put for FTP is 21, and then you would say which WAN you want to go out. Really, that's the total of it. It's pretty simple to use WAN Balancer. It really takes all the hard work of writing router rules and do dynamic IPs and so forth. And then you can also look at your sessions per IP, per interface. In this case, I have 2 interfaces, and they're heavily weighted towards the main WAN. So you're probably going to see the traffic is heavily on one and not on the other. We're just kind of waiting for that one. One of the things about WAN Balancer that you should use it with WAN Failover, because Failover keeps track of which WANs are actually up and running. So WAN Balancer will assume both WANs are up, and Nelsa gets information, so you can see here. Interface 0 is actually the external. 1 is actually the internal one, so you can see how much is going through that. And 3 is that secondary WAN, so you know ID. See, interface 5 is the special one that was for some limited equipment. So getting back to WAN Failover, the reason to use it in combination with WAN Balancer, it will tell WAN Balancer, say, hey, the main WAN is down, so only direct traffic to the secondary WAN or third or fourth, or however many WANs you have. So that's kind of a key issue here. Definitely important to use WAN Failover when you're using WAN Balancer, because otherwise it will try to redirect traffic through an interface that might be down, because it won't know unless it has failover. I've actually used failover in situations where I only have one ISP. Of course, I wouldn't use Balancer because there's nothing to balance. But this has actually given me good information on how often the particular ISP has had downtime on their connection. So I can either go back and say, hey, we're having a lot of downtime. You know, is there something you can do to improve your quality? Or I can, you know, go and say, hey, your contract says you're going to be up so much and you're not, and here's some proof for it. So it makes it kind of useful when you're working with ISPs. WAN Failover is pretty easy to set up. What you're going to do is set up some simple tests. I usually use DNS tests because it's probably the most reliable. You have to remember that if the test fails, so let's say you're pinging a website, let's say google.com for whatever reason. If you're pinging that and that particular IP address goes down, Untangle will think that that particular WAN is also down, which it may not be. So you have to pick your rules very carefully. They have to be really reliable rules, and you have to be doing some kind of test that's going to be, reliable 99% of the time. Kind of the reason I use DNS. It goes over, UDP. It's pretty reliable, and rarely do DNS servers fail. That's kind of on that. Again, like you can see in the report how many failed events that you had, how many times the WAN went down, when did it go down. You can actually look at the actual test events. I don't know, this one's pretty reliable. We had a couple of failures on the secondary WAN. So as you can see here, and you can see the times, makes it kind of useful when people are saying, oh, my phone got cut off, or, I was browsing and it just, it wouldn't continue. You can take a look at here and see if maybe there was a momentary disconnect on one of your WANs. Makes it really useful. Let's go through here. Yeah, common scenarios. So you definitely want to see if your WAN internet is up. Main reason to use WAN Failover, it runs continuous tasks. It keeps track of how many times a particular WAN was down. Makes it really useful for WAN Balancer, first of all, for keeping track of which WANs are available to redirect traffic and balance across. We also talked about locking LAN devices to one SP with our WAN Balancer rules. You can actually put a rule, and that device will only go through that particular one, or a particular set of traffic like FTP or port 80 traffic can go out a specific WAN. A lot of people use that when they have metered internet. So they might have one that's slower, but it's less costly, so they might redirect all their web browsing out that browser, while they'll have their IP phones on the more expensive, faster connection. So that's a way to use that. So you can use that to kind of tweak and manage your usage and your any costs that you have involved. Different ISP speeds. WAN Balancer doesn't require both WANs to be exactly the same. You can actually put different, you could have like a DSL WAN connection on one, and then maybe some kind of fiber connection on the other. So it will balance the connections over that based on the capacity of those tubes. So obviously it's going to direct most of the traffic through the fiber because it's a bigger bandwidth, but it's still going to use the DSP. The slower ISP for those connections. So it's going to manage the different abilities of each WAN carefully. Let's see what else we have here. Let's see if we have any questions. So I'm looking at the first one. If WAN failover is set up, can an incoming traffic still be accepted if the primary WAN connection is up? Yeah, I mean, failover is not it's not redirecting traffic based on what's up or down. It just keeps track of which WANs are available. Incoming traffic is not going to, it doesn't balance the traffic coming in. So WAN failover, let's say your primary WAN went down. If traffic coming in from, let's say you have a web server, if traffic's coming in on that, it's coming in on a specific IP address, so it won't redirect it to the secondary WAN because, of course, that secondary WAN does not have. One people kind of confuse WAN failover and balancer with load balancing, and that's kind of a different kind of thing. That's where you're balancing all the IP traffic is coming in on one IP, and then the device actually balances it as it comes through. This actually works, excuse me, in reverse. Your traffic coming in, going out is balanced across the WANs that you have. Let's take a look at another one. Can you route applications per interface? You can't route applications per interface. The reason for that is that by the time the session has gone across the Untangle to notice what kind of application, it has to look at the package. It's already gone out to that particular one, and you want to keep a session only on one WAN. So you can't tell applications, but you can do it if the application uses a specific port. For example, email. Email goes out port 25. So you can create a WAN Balancer rule where it says port 25 traffic will go out X WAN, and it will always go out to that. So you can see that through. So that's the key thing. So in event of a link failure, what alert will you get when it's down? So question. So there's actually built-in admin alerts. So if we look over here, this particular box sends me alerts. So if we go down to reports, and the admin rules, says WAN is offline. So when any WAN is offline, I'll actually get an email saying this WAN is offline. So of course, if all your WANs are down, you're not going to get the email because there's no way for the email to go down. But if only one WAN, or if you at least have one WAN up, you will get the email immediately that a particular WAN is down. So yeah, it's by email. You can also do email to text if you have that ability internally. Routing traffic by source monitoring. It's possible to redirect for a specific address. Can I redirect all Apple? Yes. What you can do is not only can you do source, which is your internal IPs, you can also do destination. And so what you would have to do is look up the ISP for like iTunes or Apple in general, and then you would enter those in. Again, you have to use the direct, let's see, we're going to do destination address. So I would do all the destination IPs for Apple. Usually you can get a whole list of them, all the ones they use. How do I set up monitoring for only one WAN? So actually, it's pretty simple. So all you're going to do is you're going to use, obviously you won't use WAN Balancer. That won't be useful in one WAN. But WAN Failover, what you're going to do, you're going to create a test. And in this case, you only have a test for one interface. So you create that test for that one interface. And then anytime that goes down, obviously you're not going to get the email immediately when the WAN is down because there's no way to send that email. But you will get reporting that when it went down and how long it stayed down, and you will get an email as soon as the connection is made again. You will get the email saying, hey, the WAN was down for this period of time. Let's see here. How do we control the traffic on layer 7? So again, it's the same discussion we had. So you can't balance a session once the session has already left your WAN. So the only way to determine the session is by IP address or the particular interface excuse me, it goes through. So it's very important that you do it by either port number or IP address, whether it's from your destination or your source. You can't have a particular application by, say, for example, using application control and using the identifier for that application as a WAN balancer. what you need to do if it uses a specific port. For example, like iTunes syncing for phones uses port 5228. So you can say all traffic on 5228 will go out a specific WAN. So you really need to translate a lot of your application control into port usage, and then from that you can create WAN balancer rules and so forth. Let's see. Yeah, it's definitely possible to redirect traffic by the port. Not a problem. It's right there in the rules. You can do either by destination port or source port. Let's take a look over here. So if we create a rule, I'd say I want to set by destination port. So let's say, I'm going to do FTP traffic, or I'm going to do SMTP, would be port 25. Let's say, and you can do multiple ports. For example, I want to do SMTP, I want to do, POP, I want to do IMAP. So I'll go ahead and say all these ports, I want it to go through my slower connection. And that's all my traffic will now, for my email, will go through that particular WAN. WAN is back online alert. No, you can create one. Right now, it only the default rule only tells you when it's down, but you can actually create a rule you can actually create your own kind of rules over here. And what I would do is probably modify this WAN is offline. So you have to be careful. So what you'd have to say is connected, and then make threshold where it would only tell you once, because otherwise it would keep telling you, hey, the WAN is up. We went over by only traffic for one port already. If you have a specific IP address going out a specific WAN, can you decide whether you want it to fall over or not? What you would have to do in that case is probably do a one-to-one NAT if you do not want it to fall over to the, let's say you have two WANs and you have it set where it mainly goes out through WAN 1. WAN 1 goes down, it will automatically be sent to WAN 2 if you have WAN Failover and WAN Balancer in there. If you do not want that to happen, what you would do is do a one-to-one NAT, and we have more on the wiki on that, on how to do one-to-one NAT.
Hey, John. Looks like you went over all the questions. A lot of them are being repeated, so hopefully all your questions are getting answered. But let's continue on. If you guys have any other questions, we do have the wiki, which is our technical documentation for all of our applications. So those are the links, as well as the forums are always there for you to ask questions to us as well as other users. And our YouTube channel also has all of our applications. John, did you have anything else you wanted to go over before we wrap up?
No, that's about it.
Okay, if you want to go to the next slide then. So as always, you may be a little confused or need help setting up or installing or configuring your Untangle solution. We do offer professional services. If that is something that you require or need assistance with, you can just contact us at sales@untangle.com. And thank you everyone for joining us. I know this was a quick webinar, but these are pretty simple applications. So hopefully this webinar kind of went over everything that is required to set both of these applications up so that they work and help keep your network up and running. We have a variety of resources, sales, support, wiki, forums, as I mentioned. We do have our next webinars up for the rest of the year, so check out our webinars on our website. Next week we actually have a 101 on NG Firewall for schools, so if that's of interest to you, please register for that, and we hope to see you next time. Thanks, John.